Shwmae a chroeso I Sgwrs, podlediad Consortiwm Canolbarth y De. Yn y podlediad hwn byddwch chi'n clywed y trafodaethau diweddara am bob math o bethau addysg. Hello and welcome to Sgwrs, the Central South Consortium podcast. In this podcast we'll bring you the very latest discussions on all things education.
Sgwrs. I'm Beth and Grace Thomas, Associate Advisor for Curriculum, Teaching and Assessment here at CSC. One of the most common requests for support and guidance we have is around the idea of developing independence in our learners. This is a priority for a lot of schools and can present a complex challenge. The research tells us that it can be helpful to think of developing independence as a two-pronged approach, that of the independent learner and independent learning. I find it helpful to consider the analogy of a marathon. Developing a curriculum that promotes the journey to independence is like planning the marathon route and ensuring that the track is up to standard, and then developing learner effectiveness, resilience, and eventually independence is like training a runner to run the route that you've planned. Both are needed to cross that finish line and be successful, but the journey to that point will potentially look different in different AOLEs or different subjects, with different contexts and with different cohorts and learners. To that end, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest practitioners who will be talking about their experience developing independence in their settings over the last few years. We have Riamani, Head of English and Media at Porthcawl Comprehensive, Max Harcombe, Second in Mathematics at Rado Comprehensive, and Carrie Fisher, Progression Step 2 Leader at Llansanna Primary. By sharing their reflections, we hope their journeys, challenges and successes will support you in your journey to promoting independence.
Hi, I'm Carrie Fisher and I'm Progression Step 2 Lead at Llansanna Primary School, and we've been working on independence for a little while now.
Hi, I'm Max Harcombe. I'm second in maths at Rado Comprehensive School and trying to promote some independence in our exam classes.
Hi, I'm Riamani. I'm the Head of English and Media in Porthcawl Comprehensive School. I've been there 8 years and we're trying to promote pupil independence across our faculty.
We thought we'd start our discussion talking about independence and the new curriculum and seeing how we've approached that differently in our different settings.
Fab, yeah. Thanks, Carrie. So how does the new curriculum within primary schools encourage students to develop independence in their learning?
Well, we've had to change our curriculum quite significantly, we would say, to match the new curriculum. And we see independence as an important way of enabling the children to meet the four purposes, so that we give them opportunities within independent activities that they can develop, as ambitious, capable learners or ethical citizens. So it enables us to do that. We've also changed our pedagogy and the way that we teach our pupils to allow for more independence. The new curriculum has also allowed us to develop our understanding of what independence is and the difference between what an independent learner is alongside what independent learning looks like. And we've been on a bit of a journey with that at Llansanna, especially when we talk about a 3-year-old who starts with us, who and their level of independence compared to what a level of independence of an 11-year-old looks like. It's quite a drastic change of what happens, and taking what happens when you have independent children, how their independent learning can look. And that we've worked a lot on that, and how our independent learning is like a gradual release of an adult support. So when they come to us at 3, they're quite reliant on an adult support, and how we can reduce that through a child's time at Llansanna. So
wow, that's quite an interesting definition, isn't it? The difference between independent learner and independent learning. It's something that we don't always specify the difference between.
No, and I think
there are specific elements of the curriculum that naturally promote independent learners or independent learning.
I think for independent learners, we're talking about their personal skills to start off with. Can they use the toilet on their own? We're at that basic a level. Can they take off their own jumper? To start with that and developing where that child is, on their journey, how they become more and more independent of making sure they bring their own PE kit to school. So that they're prepared for that they'll have a timetable. They know Tuesdays they need their PE kit without having to be prompted before. So it's as an independent learner, that's been one thing for us to work on, and particularly in making sure that our parents understand that that's what we're working towards too. That we want our children to be independent and They don't have to do everything for them. And with that, high expectations of what we expect. And, you know, we expect our children in nursery to start changing for PE. We're starting to teach them to take off their own clothes and change into new ones. Whereas, you know, at 3, so we make sure we have high expectations of that.
It's very interesting. I think it's because from a secondary kind of standpoint, we always look at maybe more of the independent learning side of things instead of the independent learner, because I think you guys at primary do all the groundwork of it, really, don't you? You do all the groundwork to build these independent learners, so they are, as you said, to remember to run their PE kit or the correct equipment because they got a certain lesson and all those kind of things. And then we end up with the trying to concentrate on the learning side of the independent learning side of things and giving them that facility a bit. And I think with the whole curriculum, I think with the Key Stage 3, I think we do have that freedom in secondary, but it slowly tapers off as we get towards our exam classes, as we do get a little bit more constraint with time and specifications and things like that, and how we can then facilitate it and things like that. It becomes a little bit more difficult. I know we're going to talk about challenges later, but that is always a big thing with the secondary school kind of like placement, is the fact that we are constrained by those at times, and it's an ethos and a culture thing that does need to change a little bit.
It's interesting, Max. I was thinking, because I think that's why the definition stood out to me with a secondary school background. You know, you're always considering how you can balance covering the curriculum with fostering independence in students. And for us, we are focused on developing independent learning rather than independent learners. And that's something I'd probably take back to my school actually and say, well, how do we do that? Because if we're thinking in that way in primary schools, are we thinking in that way in secondaries? We have created a fourth core pupil. So we are trying to create sort of the characteristics of a fourth core pupil, you know, to try and focus on the learner as well as learning. But I think that's definitely something we can learn from primary schools, because you're further down the line, I think, than we are in secondary settings, focused on learners as well as learning.
And it's, you know, it's a journey, and it takes hard work to be able to get an independent learner to do independent learning. You know, and it's quite to get the balance of that right is quite, you know. Exactly,
and I think as I think me and Ray both said, I think it's really interesting that they go hand in hand, and I think you guys clearly understand that those two things go hand in hand really well. And I think we've always had the approach of just the learning side of things, whereas actually, as you guys are doing in fourth core now, is the idea of making them independent learner.
Definitely, and I think it's really, really important that we say schools are on a journey, aren't they? And secondary schools are definitely embracing the idea of a learner. I know ours certainly is, but there is resilience in schools needed as well, isn't it? Because it's not something that changes overnight. Building learning and creating learners is something that takes time. Is that something you found, Carrie, as part of your journey?
Yeah, it's definitely taken us, you know, quite a considerable amount of time, really, from the very beginning of where we were developing independent learners and on that journey, and then looking at what independent learning looks like. I remember having a discussion with someone who came in to have a look at what we were doing, and they said, well, you have independent learners now. And we're like, oh, right, okay. So now start developing the independent learning. And it was,
we're doing it backwards, maybe. About with learning when we should think about the learner first.
Yeah. And it was, you know, just simple things like, you know, we were finding children wouldn't even go and find their own pencil. It's like, well, come on. Or, you know, they get that old age, I've got to the end of my page. Okay, what are you going to do now then? And it's just kind of like, and just, you know, simple strategies like things like 3 before me. It's not always got to be the teacher that's got to know things. And especially when we're doing like DCF tasks, it's kind of like, well, they know way better than me. Go and ask, you know, giving children the empowerment to say, you know more, you go and help them. And it's that type of giving them the independence in that, I think, has been a big thing for us.
It's self-reflection and problem-solving skills, isn't it, in some ways?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and developing the resilience then behind that when someone's not going to give you the answer straight away. That was one of, when we started our journey, it was one of the things actually when we started to look at what independence was going to look like here for independent learning. We took our vision, so we created our new vision in line with new curriculum, which was to look at together with God, we explore, discover and flourish. So we took the 3 words, explore, discover and flourish, and thought, right, how could we make our curriculum follow those? So we say, when you're working with an adult, you're in your discovery time. So you're discovering things together. You explore independently, and then we flourish all together. So like our whole school worship or whole class activities, we're flourishing together. So we've called our independent tasks now explore tasks. So children are forever using our vision in what we're doing, and it's everywhere at school. And we call it explore time, explore tasks. Now you're going to go do some explore tasks, that sort of thing. And when we first started, we thought, right, we took all AOLEs to start off with, and we were coming up with like a grid of activities that children could do when they weren't with a task in the AOLEs. And that became quite challenging to do, because it was children didn't necessarily have the skills for what we were asking them to do. So what we then found is the tasks that we were giving them were almost like holding activities. And then we didn't feel they were challenging enough. They weren't pushing them in the right way, but it did allow us to develop their independent skills, that they could do those things on their own. So they could build the confidence that they could do things without an adult, but it wasn't going to be the answer longer term. So we then worked quite hard to develop those, in that we now only look at developing children's previously taught skills. So we, in our explore tasks, we only give them literacy, numeracy, DCF, fine or gross motor, and creative and artistic tasks. And they only are set to build upon or to enhance or to develop previously taught things. So for example, if we've looked at a unit of multiplication in maths, then the following explore tasks will be revisiting multiplication. Or we've looked at coordinates, and they'll be applying coordinates in a different setting. Or we've looked at adjectives in literacy, and then they'll have an adjective gathering task to do in their explore task. So they're always revisiting previously taught things. And a big part of that also for us was to include pupil voice. So we take it as a big opportunity for the children to lead their own learning, which then comes into how we're using Curriculum for Wales, really, in that we take time in our curriculum before a PPA for teachers, take time in the week to say, right, we've got to plan our explore tasks. What have we previously learnt? And we say over the last term, over the year, or even previous year, what have you previously learnt that you can now apply into this new context? So we give them opportunity to do that, and we write them all down. We make, with a big flip grid and flip chart paper, we write them all down, and then we say thank you to those children who've given us those ideas. So when the children get their explore task grids with the work for the fortnight of their independent learning, there's like a little speech bubble on, says thank you so-and-so for this great idea. And then it's really allowed us for engagement of the children, that they're doing their tasks, they're things that they've chosen to do. So that's been a really great way forward for us, and that's what the children love about them, I'd say, is that they're applying things they already know in a different context, and they are guiding where they want those to go.
I think you've been very clear, haven't you, about what the independence in your school looks like.
Yes, you've had
collaboration. You've allowed students opportunities to make choices about their learning.
Yeah.
But you've had a very, very clear vision of what independence is to you.
Yeah.
And you're using it to sort of reinforce the learning throughout the school.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the staff have benefited from it, and do you feel that the students are better prepared for secondary school as the next step because of it? We had learning walk this week, and throughout the school there wasn't one, the 1 or 2 children off task. The whole school was on task. Wow.
Because yeah, and our behavior management here is good, don't get me wrong, but and our children were well behaved, but they love them, and they love the opportunity to explore. We've explored and changed our environment to allow for flexible seating, for more freedom, so that children only sit at a table necessarily when they're on a focus task. They could be sat on a sofa doing some DCF skills. They could be outside doing a gross motor activity. They could be in our creative areas doing a creative task, and it allows them the flexibility to do their learning where they want to. And I think for us, it's been like 3 enablers really. We've got to have the effective environment for it to work. So we've had to create areas or zones where children know the resources are, the things are there for them to do it. There's what good ones look like on the walls, all that sort of resources to help them. We've worked hard on the enabling adults, that they use questioning to upskill what's happening in the independence, using blooms and things like that. And then having the engaging learning and using pupil voice to have the engagement of the children. When you say, you know, on a Monday morning, you say, right, I've got our new explore tasks, they cheer. Because they're that, you know, because they're excited to see what's there, and then especially they get, you know, they're thrilled if they've got their little speech bubble that says thank you to them. And so I think that's been a key part for us, is that
ownership.
Yeah, the ownership, and then they do them, you know, they do them well, and they, you know, of course it's taken a lot of training, and it's taken us a long time to get to where we've got to, but it has really paid off.
Max, what about you? What strategies have you found to be most effective in engaging students in self-directed learning for math?
Yeah, I think for us, we kind of approach this idea with like our exam classes, because we always find that they struggle to know how to revise in the first place, or because they're so used to us giving them feedback and then doing the feedback that we've given them exactly as they are. Like, our feedback policies are really successful in our department and things like that. So we have those, but there is an element to that is then spoon feed them to an extent of what they need to work on, instead of them highlighting themselves what they need to work on. So we kind of went about by creating literally called independent tasks for our like sixth form group, and the whole premises and plan of them was to get them to do some questions. That obviously is part of it. The point of it was we made these levels of support that they used. So it was highlighting to them how much support they needed for that question, because quite often we find that when they're revising, they kind of just do questions and then they just repeat, and they don't really think about, oh, well, I looked at my book for that, so I actually needed a bit of help, or I talked to my friend about that question. They kind of go, oh, I know how to do it, that's great, and they move on. So we create these levels where, like, level 1 was just looking in your book, and like level 4 was the highest, which was asking your teacher and things like that, and highlighting that different levels of support means you've got different understanding kind of thing, and that tells you how much then revision and extra support and work you need to do on that topic to try and train them into those like methods of how to effectively revise for maths in a sense. Because I think they're so used to, we obviously concentrate on A level, but I think they're so used to GCSE for us to just endlessly doing past papers and not really thinking about it much. And then at A level, they do have to have a really good, deep understanding of things. And we're trying to prepare them a little bit for university, where they don't have those, they don't have like the revision structure that we give them and those kind of aspects. So we wanted them to really make sure that they're understanding how much support they're using, because looking in your book means you don't have a full understanding of that topic. And quite often, they, as I said, they'd look at their book, they do the question, they'd be like, okay, I understand that. And it's like, well, did you though, or did you need your book to help you, kind of situation? And highlighting that to them is like kind of the key point about it. So we kind of made these tasks to go with those, and then they had like video walkthroughs and like written solutions for all of them. So again, those were levels of support that they used. So for example, did they really get that stuck where they spoke to their teacher, or before they spoke to the teacher, they thought, oh, I'm just going to watch the video and kind of see how to start this. And often that's obviously the biggest step with the maths and the problem solving, is that they have to, once they get started, most of them know what to do from there. They understand their like application from that point. It's understanding that first step into it, which is often the thing that they brush over quite quickly. So that's what we really highlighted for our tasks and what we wanted them. And again, we did pupil voice at the end of it, and they were really positive. There were a few like I guess improvements that we could do, and we've implemented those. It's like some of them found that it was just them doing questions. So we've now gone to the stage where we're thinking about walking them through the first one, although that's us leading it. It's training them instead of just throwing a task at them and expecting them to know how to use it. We're trying to train them up to understand how to use them a little bit. So we're doing like the first one and going, okay, now, okay, did you look at your book? Okay, that means you use this support. Did you talk to your friend? Okay, that means you use this support. And making sure they understand how to effectively use these before they kind of move on. And they worked really well last year, and we've made those few changes, and we decided we're going to use them again this year. And we are thinking about how we could maybe implement them in other year groups as well. But overall, they're working well, and I think that's what we want to promote, because obviously, being a secondary school, we are very exam led. That's a culture thing. We can't. It's really going to be very, very difficult to try and change those kind of culture. But that means that we need to support them and not teach them how to revise and revise with them all the time and things like that.
I think it would be good for developing confidence too.
Yeah,
confidence in their own ability to be it. And that comes with it sometimes. If their children are confident in their own ability, then they feel more independent to be able to do something.
Exactly, yeah.
Do you know what I find quite interesting? We both said that, you know, we don't feel we focus on developing learners. We're focused on developing, or, you know, it's part of the journey that we're starting to focus. But it's very clear to me that you are, because for me, what I'm getting from that is that you're teaching them sort of soft lessons. You're teaching them that everybody needs support. And you're teaching them that everybody needs different layers of support. And you're actually highlighting that to them, and they are learning what different layers there are and how to evaluate the layers that they need. Those are incredibly powerful skills that they will actually use for the rest of their life, not just in education, in any kind of mode that they're in. I think that's actually a really, really powerful idea. We've used videos, we've used flipped learning, but we haven't considered the different levels of those and how we can highlight those to the pupils so that they understand that we will always need support, but there are different layers of support, and how you know, how they can evaluate the layers that they need. So that's something I'll take away. That's really, really, really interesting, genuinely. Have you noticed improvements in their confidence since you've incorporated the independent learning strategies?
Yeah, we find that as we get closer to that exam period now in the summer, they tend to be better at revising. Like we come to a revision session and they're very aware of what they can and can't do, instead of them just like showing up and being like, help me on everything. It's a bit more, okay, can you help me specifically with this, because that's what I don't understand, and that's what we want. Obviously the support's always going to be there. We're always going to help them, and everything. That's the nature of it. But when it comes to them understanding what they need to do, we are seeing the improvement in that A level, which is what we want from them.
I think that would also go into the independent learner.
Yeah, exactly.
Be more self-aware.
Absolutely.
And I think we obviously went around it a different way and thought about independent learning, and it's kind of developed the independent learner as it's gone through it, instead of going the other way around like you did, which is interesting that it can both work and both have a positive effect on it.
Yeah. What challenges have you both felt you faced?
For us,
The can of worms now, is it?
I think for us it's a big job, and it's not a quick job, and it's not a quick fix, and it's got to come from the top. It's got to be a whole culture, it's got to be a whole ethos change, that this is the way that we do things. And I think to develop that is quite tricky, to get everybody on board. Everyone has to buy into it. There can be no one who's not going to do it. It doesn't work that way. And I think taking time to do that, and sometimes when you want things to move quickly, and it's not going to move quickly because we're dealing with children who are, you know, have to develop skills to be able to do that. So that's not going to be an overnight fix. And I think that being aware that that is a challenge. I think it was on our school development plan for 2 years to develop independence.
Wow.
You know, so it's you know, we've only got to the point now that we can get, you know, a learning walk and everyone's doing what it's like it is now. You know, it's been a long time to get there.
It's funny because I find if you ever ask staff what do they want to develop, certainly in secondary schools, the first thing they will say is, I want more independent pupils. But then at the same time, if you this would be guesswork, but I imagine if you ask them, what they probably most fear is actually not having control as well. So I think there's that's sort of the issue you have, isn't it? Is we want independent learners, but do we have the confidence to step back and allow them to be independent? If you don't allow someone to be responsible, they never learn responsibility. So I think for me, that would be a great challenge, is overcoming personally and within a professional setting that desire to control, to cover every eventuality, to make sure I have revised them within an inch of depth, to ensure that their results are superb. And that is a cultural shift, but also I think a personal and professional shift.
Yeah, it was for me. I was traditionally teaching a whole class lesson, and that's the way I went about it. It was like, what do you mean half of them aren't going to be with me? Half of them will be working independently. And it's like, well, how do I know what they're doing is good enough? And that's how it's, the journey has been rigorous in what we've done to make sure that we know what they are doing independently is as good as what they were doing with us.
Absolutely. Yeah. My desire to develop independence, I got to be honest, started with COVID. I think when COVID hit and suddenly all the children were away from you and you didn't have that control anymore. And I felt like I was letting children down because we weren't prepared as a school, as an individual, as a head of faculty. I wasn't prepared for that eventuality where they weren't all sitting in front of me. And I made a decision that I would never, ever allow my team, my department to be in that situation again. I wanted to promote independence so that if there ever was a time where children needed to learn away from us, they were able to do so. So we developed, over the years, we've gone through various sort of different parts of the journey, but it started with developing our blended learning, created a departmental website, all our resources being online, videos and audio discussions through every single resource. But that's kind of just replacing the teacher and putting them in the house rather than actually developing independence over the long term. So now we've approached more flipped learning techniques. And now we're really very much focused on actually using AI, so generative AI, to develop independence. So, for example, we're creating podcasts for children to listen to at home, using the Notebook LM software. And then we're using Brisk Teaching to create sort of Google Forms to test the podcast. And these aren't things that replace classroom learning. They're in addition to it. It's focused on bringing independence to pupils, setting independent booklets that are self-learn, blended learning. I did a master's qualification and the entire qualification was online. And I was mystified by it and the opportunities it provided. So that's what we do now. We have sort of to really challenge the top students, but students at all levels as well. We will create booklets that they can do in addition to classroom work to promote independence and ownership over their own learning. This is your learning. This is what I will provide in the classroom. Learning never stops. You can continue that learning in your own time. I'm giving you the resources to do it, but it's up to you to take that step. We have majorly focused that on A-level. And I think that probably says something about where I am and my fears about loosening that control. I do feel that it is developing independence at A-level. I would like it to be something we do lower down the school as well, but it is that culture of independence, isn't it? And ensuring that we feel confident enough to do that. I know we've had a lot of Key Stage 3 led research tasks that, again, using booklets. A member of my team has very much developed sort of using online teaching to take themselves through context research, etc. And the one stage we probably haven't done it very much is Key Stage 4, which again comes back to our discussions on where secondary schools are and the challenges that we face. How do you feel parents feel about independence and learning, Max?
Oh, I think there's still a culture of ownership on the teacher, of taking that control, like revision sessions and stuff like that. So I think there's a bit of a cultural change that needs to be made with the parents as well. But as primary staff are doing, and they're building that culture with parents, I think as that continues, I think that will be brought forward. As you said about COVID, I think because we all got hit with the idea of all of a sudden having to do online and not having like the correct resources and things like that, and also the fact that kids came back not very independent at that point, and we're still seeing the like cause of those things, and with and it's the same with obviously the parents that has came up with them as well, and it's the whole situation with those is still a difficult one, and I think it's a cultural thing that will change over time, like I said, if primary schools are doing all the amazing work that we're talking about today, then eventually when they come up to us, there will be that cultural shift of this is that we're trying to make your pupil independent, so they have the skills to learn independently as they get older and older and older, and we're here to kind of allow that to happen, and instead of us being the I guess the main drive of revision as such and all those kind of situations.
I think the transparency with parents of what our high expectations are and how parents can help enable their child to be independent. You know, it's a key thing. Just it's a little thing here, but just can you just label all their things, because then they can look for their own things themselves, because, you know, and it's just like little bits like that just really helps to, you know, what our expectations are for reading in a home and compared to a school, and just so that parents are aware in how we can work together to help their child.
I think as well it's sharing these like ideas and resources with parents at the same time they're being shared with like the pupils. So for example, when we launched this independent task last year and this year, we shared it both with pupils and parents, so they were both aware of why they were there and what we were trying to get out of them. I think again that's the kind of like ideas and cultural shift that we need, that we're making parents aware of what we're trying to develop within them, instead of just giving them to the pupils and expecting them to transfer that information back home, and home not understanding what we're trying to do as such, and trying to get a bit more of a cohesion between all the three, us, home and the pupil, all in one.
But I think more conversations need to take place then, don't they, about the soft skills like independent learning, for example. You know, do we discuss with our parents the importance of developing independence, and but also I think it is balancing it in terms of equity, because just thinking of the differences between boys and girls, dare I use the stereotype, but also obviously between children who come from middle class homes and children who have more challenging environments. The learners that we see in front of us are so diverse, their backgrounds are so diverse. We're trying to develop independent learning, but the context that they come with affect their ability to learn independently so much. Maybe we need to sort of offset that a lot more than we do by having these conversations with parents about learning, because maybe some parents don't realize what they need to do to develop independence. And also maybe the backgrounds are so diverse that they're just not equipped with the skills to develop independence. And we also need to accept that for some learners, developing independence will occur more slowly, and we don't want to pull the rug under them so quickly that the independent learning doesn't go on because they're not enough of an independent learner yet. Does that make sense?
But equally, we can see that some of our learners who come from the more challenging backgrounds can be more independent than the ones who don't.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Yeah, very, very interesting. And so it's dealing with all of that, isn't it? It's managing all of those things and ensuring parity in the same way we do offset, you know, numeracy and reading skills to ensure that there's a base level. We need to think about a base level of independence. What's the minimum requirement we expect at every level? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think especially when we're transitioning to you know, the understanding of what's happening beforehand, of, you know, what are those learners looking like in year 6? You know, as we had a conversation of, you know, we're expecting them to get on with activities all by themselves. They're in a classroom with flexible seating. They can get up, they can, you know, do jobs outside, they can go out, and then they come into a secondary setting where they could be sat in rows.
Sit down, where I see.
It's a completely different thing when you look for transition between the two settings. That's such a, you know, an incredible difference between, you know, so as much as primaries can prepare children for that transition, in that they can make year 6 a little bit more formal in that they know that's what they're going to. I think it's an area to just, you know, to explore, I think.
That's making me think we need to have conversations about the routines, the practices and habits we expect from a year 7 learner, we expect from a year 9 learner. Those would be really, really interesting conversations with colleagues, wouldn't they? What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think also we could learn so much more from what our primary colleagues are doing, like in our classroom and other things, because it shouldn't be the fact that you are training them to learn the way that we teach and things like that. It should be we're adapting to them as well in both directions, instead of just being you guys are going to teach them how that they're going to be sat in rows or whatever and not get out your seat and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Teach them to be a factory worker. Ken Robinson's right. Yeah, so that's quite scary, isn't it, really, to think of it, isn't it? So what advice would we give, sort of, primary to secondary? What advice would you give us to sort of implement more independence in our classrooms?
Be aware that the children coming to you are far more independent than you think they are.
It's a hard one to take.
It's really hard. Yes, I think that would be my advice. They're more capable than they often let on straight away. And I think it's very tricky for them. They come from being the top dogs, don't they, here? And like I had year 6 pupils yesterday who conducted a learning walk with visitors to school, and they wandered around. Yeah, like they did the whole thing, and they, that's the type of activities they do here as normal, and you think it's, then when you think what do they come to in year 7, I think that's an expectation is very different.
Yeah, I think we need to talk more cross-phase, don't we? I think there needs to be a lot more cross-phase discussion about learners not learning. It's where we were at the start, I think, wasn't it? Yeah. What would be your top tips, Max?
I think the biggest thing I've learned is to trust them, like to give them, just allow them that freedom in a way, because I think we can be a bit regimented sometimes in secondary schools. And we're all guilty of it. And I think being allowed, as we've discussed with primary colleagues, like throughout this whole thing, I think it's just allowing them that freedom to be a little independent. And if they need guidance from there, then we're there to guide them through it. But I think the first step is allowing them to be enabling them, a bit more trust in them, and just allowing that to happen and seeing, and then developing them from there, instead of it being I'm just going to restrict it from the beginning and then let you go, and then it doesn't work as well in a way.
I think my top tip, if I was going to give advice to colleagues thinking about developing pupil independence, would be don't give up when they fail first time. I think it's that kind of, independence is a skill. You've got to be resilient in order to teach them to be resilient. If they haven't had that skill developed slowly, they're going to struggle. Don't give up. Just sort of keep trying.
I put the same as a top tip: the empowerment of staff to make changes, to take the risks. Collaboration was a big one for us, that we worked well together to trial things out and say, well, how did that work? And just take time to reflect, to improve, to enhance. And the culture ethos is a big one. That's got to be there to be able to make a good change, I think.
How much discussion have you had with your secondary about your work and developing independence across?
We tend to feed to two secondaries, and both have been open to what we do. But as you've said, when the system is as it is, it's a huge shift.
And do you find resistance from certain students? Just thinking of certain students with certain rigid mindsets, have you found that that causes problems?
No, no, I can't say we. Because we've made rigid staff. And it hasn't been, to be honest. We've all been on this journey together, and we've all questioned, and rightly so. We should all question and say, is this the best? Should we be this way? Should it be that way? And I think when we've had, external people in who've rubber stamped and said, yeah, this is looking good, then we know we're on the right track, and it pushes us forward a little bit more. But I think that's been important. But I think because the children have ownership of it, because they are leading, what they would like to do, because they have the space, the flexibility, they can pick which explore task they're going to start with first. Because they have that, we have very little reluctance because they like to do them.
I've definitely found it's been a positive experience because I think the students enjoy independent learning and they enjoy being developed as an independent learner. And as I said, it is a journey for us. We're still learning about different tools that we can use and different resources, but it's certainly something that has improved my teaching and improved my relationships with students, I think, because they enjoy the fact that you trust them. And they enjoy it. It's and especially as part of that ethos and conversations with them, this is your GCSE, these are your life skills. And I think they enjoy being empowered to sort of lead on their own curriculum and to make choices about their learning and to learn at their own space and time. So it's certainly a very, very positive journey for me, but one that isn't finished.
Yeah.
Diolch o galon. Thank you so much to Reed, Carrie and Max for their reflections and conversations. It's clear that the process of developing independence is one that is unique to each setting and context, and is also one that takes time and trial and error to get right and to embed fully. For further reading and guidance, we would recommend the EEF, or the Education Endowment Foundation, Guide to Effective Metacognition in the Classroom. The 7-step guide helps to promote independence and learner effectiveness. We'd also recommend the Better Learning Through Structured Teaching book by Fisher and Frey. And if you want to develop the actual independent activities themselves, if you're at that point in your journey, then something like Tom Sherrington and Ollie Cav's walkthroughs chapters on Mode B learning are a good place to start. Of course, there's lots of other reading available. These are just some good starting points. You can find out more about developing independent learning, discuss and reflect with other practitioners and try practical applications and strategies also at our professional learning events. Our events are designed for practitioners to receive research and guidance along with a chance to explore key concepts in practice with other practitioners from the region. As an attendee, you'll receive all the materials from the day, which can then be used to cascade aspects of that professional learning back to your school or setting. All of our events are free and designed as a result of requests and recommendations from schools in the region. So if you're interested, book your place through Cronva or talk to your improvement partner for more details on our professional learning offer. That's it for this episode of Sgwrs. Thank you so much for listening. Diolch yn fawr. And you can find us on X at CSCJES or on Instagram at central_south_consortium. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Diolch.
Diolch am wrando ar y benod hon o Sgwrs. Cofiwch ein dilyn ar Twitter a Facebook, tanysgrifio ein sianel YouTube, ymuno yn cymunedau ar ein gwefan a darllen ein bwletin ysgolion wythnosol am y newyddion diweddaraf. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sgwrs. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, join our online communities via our website and read our weekly school bulletin for the latest news. Hwyl am y tro. Bye for now.